Hello, and welcome to Book Club Social 2022. This is our fourth year hosting this event here at the library. I'm so glad that you could join us virtually, and especially because of the blizzard today, it's probably best that we're meeting online. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brenna Murphy, and I run the book club service here at the Glen Ellyn Library. I'm joined here tonight by Rebecca Vnuk from Library Reads. Hello, Rebecca.
Hello.
So a few housekeeping things before we start. Somebody had asked in the chat if they were going to be on video. Nope, you can see and hear us, but we can't see or hear you. So if you have any questions, just drop those in the chat. And we would love to hear any questions or comments you have throughout the evening. I'm going to be asking a few questions here and there, and I have the first one up on the screen here. So I would love to hear what your favorite book of 2021 is. Very excited to see what you think. So Rebecca and I have prepared 20 books to tell you about today. We think they'll all make really great book club reads. Then we're going to do a little Q&A. So if you have any book or book club specific questions, we're going to get to those after the book talk. And finally, we'll do our grand prize drawing. So I've got my little gift basket behind me, if you can see it. And it has all sorts of fun stuff from downtown Glen Ellyn people. So we've got a gift card to the bookstore of Glen Ellyn. We've got some chocolate from the Stom Chocolate Shop. We've got some library read swag, courtesy of Rebecca. So we've got some book bags, some bookmarks, some pens in there, which is awesome. And then a few more little surprises. So I will draw one name. You do have to be in attendance to win, and you can either pick it up at the library or I can drop it off to you, and I'll reach out to our winner after the evening is over, and we can sort it out. So first off, Rebecca's going to tell you a little bit about library reads. So Rebecca, if you want to take it away.
Great. Thanks, Brenna. As Brenna mentioned, I'm the Executive Director for Library Reads, and Library Reads is a nonprofit organization that creates a list of the most anticipated upcoming adult books every month, as voted on by library staff across the country. I won't take up too much of our time talking about it because you can go to our website, which is libraryreads.org. You'll find the current list there, as well as an archive of over 1,000 library staff recommended reads from 2013 on. And one of the things we're going to be doing this year, we have partnered up with Booklist, which is a book review journal from the American Library Association, and they are featuring the Library Reads lists in a new reader magazine that's available for library patrons for free digitally online. And they do our list every month, and we're going to start doing extra lists for them, including book club picks. So I thought maybe this group would be excited to hear that. We will be choosing books that have made the list over the last 9 years and flagging them as good book club choices. So be looking for that soon. Thanks, Brenna.
Yes, I would just love to endorse Library Reads. It's a really great resource for all of book clubs. So definitely check it out if you haven't before. So I've heard from a few of you about your favorite book that you read in 2021. So I just want to shout those out really quick. We have someone who said The Lincoln Highway, Know My Name by Chanel Miller, 1,000 White Women, Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell, Just As I Am by Cicely Tyson, Ordinary Grace, that's a classic, excellent one. Strangers on a Train, American Dirt, Harlem Shuffle. Thank you all for responding. That's a lot of answers and all very good books. So I'm going to tell you really quick about our book club service. A lot of you are already signed up, so I'll make it pretty short. So if you don't know already, you can get your book club books through the library. All you need is at least one person in your book club who lives in Glen Ellyn. And once you sign up, you get access to more than 50 of what I call our book bundles, which I have a picture of them on the screen here. Basically, it's 10 regular print, a large print, and an audio whenever we can get it. And then I can send you discussion guides over email or in print. And of course, I love making recommendations. So you can reach out to me anytime and I will give you some book recommendations. That's my favorite thing. Any questions about that, you can reach out to me. I'll have my email on the end of the presentation here. So I'm going to get us started with our first book of the evening. It is The Maid by Nita Prose. And I just finished this one last week. I listened to it and I loved it so much that I was like, I have to talk about this next week so I can tell everyone how great it is. So what's really great about it is the main character. And it's a woman named Molly. And she's a maid at a high-end motel. And she just absolutely loves her job. She loves everything to be neat and in order. So like being a maid is just the perfect thing for her. And she's very thorough. And although it's never stated explicitly in the book, it's kind of assumed that she's somewhere on the spectrum. And that's why she really likes the rules and the order, and she takes things very literally. And sometimes she kind of struggles in social situations. And Molly was raised by her grandmother, who has all these kind of rules that are sprinkled about the book on like how you should behave in every situation. So the excitement starts when one day Molly is, going through cleaning the rooms, and she goes to one of the guest rooms of one of their wealthiest clients, and she actually finds him dead in his bed. And so she's dragged into this murder investigation. She becomes a prime suspect. There's all sorts of shady characters. And the thing about Molly is that she just assumes the best of everyone. So as the reader, you like pick up on this context of these social situations, and you're like, no, don't trust that person. But it takes her a little while. She kind of learns, who she should trust and who she shouldn't. But it has this really fun mystery aspect to it. I would call it a dark comedy because there is a little bit of humor mixed in. But if you're a fan of murder mysteries, neurodiverse characters, and page turners, you'll want to pick this one up. It is The Maid by Nita Prose.
All right. And my first pick, I noticed someone said it was the best book they read last year. So yay. This is The Lincoln Highway by M.R. Towles. In 1952, cast-offs from a Nebraska juvenile detention camp embark on a road trip that takes them in different directions than initially intended. There's a lot of genuine sweetness and a lot of loss in this exuberant book, which is full of characters that readers will care about deeply. So in this one, it's literary. There are great characters in this. It's multi-layered. So readers and book clubs who like literary fiction with interesting characters in the vein of John Irving or Anne Patchett should enjoy this one.
Very popular with our book clubs, and we have that one as a bundle if you're interested in
reading. Very cool.
My next read is our first nonfiction book of the night. It is Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty by Patrick Radden Keefe. You might recognize this author. He wrote a book called Say Nothing that was also pretty popular about Northern Ireland a couple of years ago. But this one is one of the most hard-hitting nonfiction books published in the last year. And it's all about the Sackler dynasty and this family. You may know them as Purdue Pharma. They're one of the richest families in the world because they're responsible for the making and marketing of OxyContin, Valium, and all these other drugs. And they're, considered to blame for the opioid epidemic by many. So if you follow the news, you'll know about their lawsuits. It's kind of an ongoing saga. But the author goes way back, multiple generations of this family, talks about how they got their start, how things got to where they are today. And he also digs into like the politicians who are taking bribes and the shady doctors who are prescribing these medications, and kind of ties it all back to the Sacklers. This is a kind of book that will make you very angry. There's a lot of injustice, and I think because of that, it makes it really discussable. And so, if you like true crime, things that tie into what's going on in the news, really well-researched books, you'll want to pick this up. It is Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty by Patrick Radden Keefe. And one more thing, I forgot to mention this at the beginning. You don't need to write all these down. I'm going to email a handout at the end of the evening that's going to have all these books listed. So just wanted to mention that.
All right, my next title is The Personal Librarian by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. So this novel is both a history of and an homage to the Morgan Library, which is one of the world's greatest private libraries in New York City. It's the story of a young African-American woman named Belle who poses as a white woman of the last time we did this program. She is a master of creating historical fiction. She focuses on real, often overlooked women in history. So all of her books are really excellent for people who like historical fiction and nonfiction based in history, and very, female centered. And then co-author Victoria Christopher Murray is an award-winning novelist who started out self-published, but now has over 30 best-selling contemporary African-American fiction titles. So this is, if you like things that are based on real people or places, of course, it's library themed, which is, makes it great. And for fans of historical novels, like Fiona Davis, for example, or Kate Moore's works of nonfiction that feature strong women from history, those would be good read-alike choices as well. That's The Personal Librarian by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray.
My next pick is The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. And some of you might be familiar with this author. She's won both the Pulitzer and the National Book Award, so anything written by her is going to be good. This one has a bit of an unusual premise, so it's semi-autobiographical. It takes place in a bookstore in Minneapolis, and the author happens to own a bookstore in Minneapolis. There's also a character named Louise. In a sense, this is also a ghost story. So there's this spirit named Flora who is haunting the bookstore. And this person was not really well liked by the rest of the employees. She was a white woman who had made up ancestry of Native American, that she was Native American, which many people find offensive. And then one of the other employees that we hear about is named Tuki. And she is an Ojibwe woman who was imprisoned for unknowingly transporting a dead body across state lines. And now she's been released from prison. She's coming back to work at the bookstore. And then we really get to know a bunch of employees who work here. I think this book will appeal to book lovers as well as bookstore lovers. It has kind of a magical realism element, if that's something that appeals to you, and really endearing and quirky characters. If you like reading books about Native American experiences, hauntings, and ghosts, and then a little bit of humor worked in there, you'll want to read this one. It is The Sentence by Louise Erdrich.
And this is The Kitchen Front by Jennifer Ryan. In World War II era Great Britain, 4 women compete for the chance to co-present a BBC radio program called The Kitchen Front, helping housewives create healthful and tasty meals with their war rations. As these women compete against themselves and each other, the contest threatens to tear their community apart until they can find common ground and work together for a common good. This is sort of gentle-ish fiction, historical fiction. Of course, there are recipes included, which I know sometimes a lot of readers like. It's a great story of female friendship. I also think, even though it is historical, it will appeal to people who like Great British Baking Show, for example, if you're looking for a contemporary matchup. So that's sort of where I'm going with that one. I think that it's got a nice light sense of humor, but there's plenty of things to talk about since we're looking at history and World War II and kind of like how rationing affected people's lives, especially homemakers. So that's The Kitchen Front by Jennifer Ryan.
Next up is The Spanish Daughter by Lorena Hughes. This is historical fiction. It's set between Spain and Ecuador right after World War I. The main character is a woman named Puri, and when her father passes away, she finds out that she has inherited this cocoa estate in Ecuador. So her and her husband, they leave Spain, they get on a ship, they're going over to Ecuador, and he is murdered while they're on the ship. And it turns out that the person who kills him was actually trying to kill Puri. So she decides to assume his identity and start living as a man, which is, of course, a lot safer for travel and just life in general at the time. So she shows up at this cocoa estate and she, starts running it. And this mystery element is introduced. It turns out that her father, who had passed away, had a lot of enemies and was hiding a lot of secrets. The mystery is kind of low key, but it just keeps the plot moving and kind of engaging. If you're someone who likes to read historical fiction to learn something, this is it's really well researched, and you're going to learn about the chocolate industry in South America. So if that's something that appeals to you, there are also really well drawn out characters and really lush descriptions of the settings. This one's being compared to Julia Alvarez and Isabel Allende, if those are authors that you like. But if you're a fan of historical fiction, international settings, a little bit of mystery, this is The Spanish Daughter by Lorena Hughes.
I just wanted to jump in there, Brenna, and say I love that you made that note about if you like to learn things as well, because I always do, and I love when a book is well researched and you can tell. So
yeah, me too.
Glad you pointed that out. All right, so my next pick, definitely not anything you will learn in here. It is supernatural thriller. This is The Drowning Kind by Jennifer Mcmahon. So the waters of Brandenburg Springs are said to have miraculous curative properties, but rumor has it that the healing always comes with a price. When Jax's sister drowns in the pool filled with the spring's water, she must discover the truth behind the legends. So this is really a wonderful, creepy, supernatural thriller with a great back and forth from the earliest 20th century to the present. So we meet the family that currently owns the property and lives in it. And then we go back to the early 20th century when the property was first being built and where the supernatural element kind of comes in. Now, it's definitely not over the top scary. I definitely would say creepy rather than scary. So don't let that put you off. I really think this would be a good choice for clubs that are looking for something a little bit different. One of the reasons that I picked it as a good book club choice is because right after I read it, I could not stop talking to people about it. I really wanted someone to discuss the ending with. The ending is fantastic, and it's definitely discussion worthy. So if your club is interested at all in something a little bit different, maybe something a little supernatural, this is one to try. So that's The Drowning Kind by Jennifer Mcmahon.
I've read another one of Jennifer McMahon's books. I can't remember the title right now, but very spooky. And as you said, it's like a good way to mix it up a little bit.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, next up is Beautiful Little Fools by Jillian Cantor. And this is a retelling of The Great Gatsby from the perspective of the female characters. So to set the scene, it's August 1922. Jay Gatsby has just been found dead in his swimming pool. And at first it seems like a simple case, but then the detective finds a hairpin in the bushes beside the pool. And Detective Frank Charles is determined to get to the bottom of what happened. So it turns out there were 3 women who might know something about this murder. We have Daisy Buchanan, Gatsby's old love, Jordan Baker, Daisy's best friend, and Catherine McCoy, a women's rights activist. And so the story goes into the events leading up to the murder and what was going on in these women's lives. You may recognize those names if you've read The Great Gatsby, but you don't necessarily have to have read it or have read it recently to enjoy this. It's just kind of a nice jumping off point for a fun story. What I like about it is that it has all the glitz and glamour of the Jazz Age, a lot of similar themes to the original Gatsby, so money, love, power, but there's also a bit of a suspense element to it, and I've heard it compared to Big Little Lies in that way. So if you are interested in reimagined classics, historical fiction, feminist retellings, this is Beautiful Little Fools by Jillian Cantor.
And next up is The Night Always Comes by Willie Vlautin. Lynette is trying to buy her family's home from her landlord as housing prices rise exponentially around her. At the last moment, her mother says she will not co-sign for the loan, and Lynette doesn't qualify on her own. In a last-ditch effort, Lynette sets off on an odyssey of collecting old debts and a miniature crime spree. So this is a short literary read that's filled with fascinating characters. It's got a straightforward pace. There's lots of, if your club is interested in class issues, it was very absorbing. One of the things I like to compare it to, if your club did Valentine by Elizabeth Wetmore from last year, this would be an excellent companion read-alike to that. It reminded me a lot about that. Sort of hard scrabble characters, definitely. And it's well-paced, but fairly short, so kind of easy to get through as well. So that's The Night Always Comes by Willie Vlautin.
All right, my next pick is The Swimmers by Julie Atsuka. This is a really lovely work of contemporary fiction, and I just love the cover. It just reminds me of summer. So she is the author of The Buddha in the Attic and When the Emperor Was Divine, which were both pretty big book club hits, so you may have heard of this author before. And this story is all centered around this public swimming pool and the people who go there to swim laps. And then one day a crack starts to form at the bottom of the pool and it becomes apparent that it's going to be shut down. The thing is that the swimming plays a central part in the lives of the people who go to this pool every day. And so without it, they're kind of set adrift. And the main character is named Alice, and she has dementia, and she's found that swimming laps kind of keeps her memory on track and keeps her going. And then when she's unable to do that any longer, her condition starts to deteriorate, and she starts having flashbacks to her time at a Japanese internment camp during World War II. And all of this is narrated by Alice's daughter, who's witnessing her mother's decline. So really, it's a book about mothers and daughters and this relationship that hasn't always been perfect, and it's kind of emotionally fraught. Atsuka has a really unique and kind of poetic writing style, so it's another way to kind of mix it up. It's a really heartbreaking and emotional story. It's at times very sad, but you really start to care for these characters because they're just written so well. So if you like these mother-daughter relationship themes, grief, loss, illness, kind of an unconventional structure, you might like this one. It is The Swimmers by Julie Atsuka.
Okay, and up next, we've got some more nonfiction for you. The Woman They Could Not Silence, One Woman, Her Incredible Fight for Freedom, and the Men Who Tried to Make Her Disappear by Kate Moore. And as noted on the cover there, she's the author of The Radium Girls, which I know is a very good book club pick. So I thought, let's talk about this one too. So in 1860, Elizabeth Packard was committed to an insane asylum by her husband with no evidence of any condition other than she disagreed with him on some issues and spoke her mind. I would be in very big trouble, I think. Moore deftly presents Packard's story of confinement, her subsequent trial, and crusade to improve women's legal standing. Book clubs interested in stories of trailblazing women, legal thrillers, or even true crime would enjoy this one. It's meticulously researched. And as noted previously, a good read-alike author, if you're talking about fiction, would be author Marie Benedict. So these are both authors that talk about real women, strong women, and real societal issues happening at their time in history. So that's The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore.
We read this one with the library book club a couple months back.
Excellent.
And it's one of those books that you're just like shaking with rage while you read it, because it's just, but we had a laugh because at one point in the book, there's a list of the reasons that women could be imprisoned. And one of them was novel reading. And so we were like, well, all of us are going to be sent to the asylum.
Right? The whole wing of the prison is just full of us book readers.
All right, my next pick is What the Fireflies Knew by Kai Harris. So this is a book that's told from the perspective of 11-year-old Kenyatta Bernice, also known as KB. And this is very much a coming-of-age story. It's also set in the Midwest in Michigan, so first in Detroit and then in Lansing. And the story starts after KB's father dies of an overdose, and her mom is kind of sent away. Her family loses their house, and so she goes to live with her grandfather. And her older sister, who used to be her best friend, is now a teenager and kind of wants nothing to do with her. So she's kind of left on her own. She makes friends with some of the kids across the street, and because these kids are white and she is Black, they kind of treat her differently. So now she's also grappling with racism on top of everything else that's going on. And everything takes place over the course of a single summer as KB's life is just completely turned upside down. There are themes of grief, addiction, poverty, racism, difficult family relationships. It's really heartbreaking, and you just really feel for this main character. She's 11 years old, and she's dealing with all of this stuff. And also because it's written from her perspective, you could really feel like you're in her shoes. So Kai Harris is a debut author, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more of her. I'll also mention this one just came out yesterday, so it's a new release. I've heard it being compared to Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward and Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. And I would throw in Where the Crawdads Sing as well. I think there's some similarities there. But if you like coming of age stories, broken families, kind of heartbreaking writing, you'll want to pick this one up. It is What the Fireflies Knew by Kai Harris.
We've got another debut. This is All Her Little Secrets by Wanda M. Morris. All is not as it first seems in this thriller set in present-day Atlanta. In-house attorney Elise is suddenly elevated to corporate general counsel after her boss's death, but things don't quite add up. This is a beautifully written, entertaining mystery with on-target social commentary about workplace politics, racial and sexual discrimination, and other legal, ethical, moral dilemmas. So this would be a good pick for clubs that are interested in contemporary issues. It's also nicely fast-paced. I think sometimes legal fiction or thriller, those are a little, some book clubs are kind of like, oh, this isn't serious enough for us. But I think when you've got something that's fast-paced and thrilling, but also then dovetails with some of these contemporary issues and moral dilemmas, there's lots of juicy stuff to discuss there. So this would be a good pick for that kind of group. Some good read-alike author, or a good read-alike author would include Attica Locke. So that's All Her Little Secrets by Wanda M. Morris.
My next pick is The Family by Naomi Kurpitsky, and I've been talking about this book for months. I just thought it was so excellent. Another one that I listen to if you like audiobooks. So this is historical fiction. It's set mostly in the 1950s in New York, and it's about two best friends, Sophia and Antonia. And what makes them unique is that both of their families are in the mafia. But it's less about like the actual crime and more about how the mafia life affects the women in the families. And Sophia and Antonia are really engaging characters. They're really different. Sophia is more reserved and more resigned to the typical family life, whereas Antonia is more ambitious and pursues a track that's a lot less common for women. So the book starts when they're kids and they're growing up next door to each other. And then they grow up, they get married, they have their own children, and they start to push back on the expectations for women that there were at the time in their own ways. So it does move a little bit slowly, as family sagas tend to do. So I'll say like the first half of the book is a bit slower, and then the story kind of picks up in the second half. But you get really absorbed in the characters and their lives, and it really just builds up to this action that happens in the second half of the book. I've seen this one compared to My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante because of the female friendship aspect to it. I've also seen The Godfather or Sopranos or those like mafia type of shows, which I think is fair, but I think it's a little bit more about like the women, like family side of it, rather than like the actual crime. But if you are a fan of mafia stories, female friendship, engaging writing, you will like this one. It is The Family by Naomi Kurpitsky.
All right, and next up we have Beasts of a Little Land by Jahia Kim. Hauntingly tragic and beautifully tender, this is the story of Jade On, which is interwoven with the fate of Korea in early 20th century. Jade is apprenticed to a courtesan at a young age, and her friendships there form an unbreakable bond that leads them through multiple tragedies and loves. So this is recommended for clubs who like historical fiction. It's a good coming of age story. It's definitely this kind of epic historical novel. It's, I believe, around 400 pages, so it's a little long, but it's very compelling, which makes you kind of read a little bit faster than you might think. But it's definitely, there are some scenes that are hard, so I like to give that little warning in there. This is, after all, about the Japanese occupation of Korea, so there's a little bit of violence and a little bit of graphicness there. And also, she is, as I said, apprenticed to a courtesan, so there's some sex in there as well, just for clubs that need to know that. But this is a very immersive read that weaves a love story within the history of 20th century Korea. So that's Beasts of a Little Land by Jahia Kim.
My next pick is Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen, which I'm not done with it yet. I picked it up recently. I've just started it. This is family drama at its best, which is kind of what Franzen is known for. So it's all about the Hildebrandt family. And it takes place the day before Christmas Eve in 1971 in the Chicago suburbs, so kind of a local setting. And pretty much the entire book takes place over the course of one day. So it's kind of like zooming in with a microscope on the dynamics of this family. So the parents are Russ, who's a pastor, and his wife, Marianne, and their marriage is kind of on the verge of collapse, and they're both hiding things that are revealed throughout the story. Their oldest child is Clem, and he is home visiting from college, and he has a big secret to share. There's Becky, who's the social butterfly of her high school, and now she's kind of drifting into the 70s counterculture movement that's going on. There's the younger brother, Perry, who has been selling drugs to middle schoolers, but he kind of wants to reform and become a better person. And then the youngest child, Judson, who's the only perspective we don't really get in the story. So everything going on in the 70s is very present in this book. So the Vietnam War, the counterculture, all of that plays a pretty big part in these characters' lives. And I will say they're not necessarily characters that you're going to like. They're very flawed characters, and Franzen is really good at digging into the psychological side of them. So you're not necessarily going to like them or their choices, but I think that makes them all the more intriguing and what makes it so good at discussing. Fair warning, this one is pretty long. It's like 520 pages. So if you do choose it for book club, maybe do it like when you're skipping a month before, when you have a little bit of extra time. This one is also set to be a trilogy. This is the first book. So if you like it, you'll have 2 more to look forward to. If you're a fan of complicated families, Midwestern settings, and literary writing, you'll want to pick this up. It is Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen.
All right, and next up we have another debut novel. This is The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan. When recently divorced Frida leaves her young daughter home alone for just a moment, she's sentenced to a re-education center where she must prove she's a good mother by bonding with a lifelike doll. This is a chilling dystopian novel which highlights how performative and competitive modern parenting can be. The author is local. She's from Oak Park, and she's getting a lot of attention for her debut novel. I think this is super timely, especially for anybody who's been on any sort of parenting group on Facebook or social media. We all kind of feel like it's only a short turn before the state starts monitoring all the things we're doing. So definitely, if your club is interested in dystopian or near future novels, interested in women's rights and issues, this is a pick for you. Also, clubs who enjoyed books like The Handmaid's Tale or Vox by Christina Vulture will definitely want to discuss this one for sure. So that's The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan.
Yeah, this one's getting a lot of attention. It's on my to-read list. I'm pretty excited about it.
Excellent.
All right, my last pick of the evening is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. This is a memoir. It was considered one of the best books of 2021. It showed up on all those end of the year lists. And I just absolutely loved it. It's raw, it's moving, it's so hard to put down. So it's the story of Michelle's relationship with her mother who died of cancer, which is not a spoiler. She talks about it in the first paragraph. It's very honest. So her and her mom did not always have the best relationship. As she was growing up, they fought a lot, were like a bit estranged for a time. And then when her mother is diagnosed, Michelle moves back in with her to care for her. And it's very honest. So it's, she talks about the devastating side of caring for someone with cancer and, hair loss. She really doesn't hold back. She's very honest about all of that. And even though it sounds a bit weird, this is also like a food and travel memoir. So food was very important to Michelle and her mother. That's where the title of the book comes from. So for those who don't know, H Mart is an Asian grocery store. So her and her mother would go there and pick out food that they would cook together. And then after her mother passes away, she finds a lot of comfort in these recipes. And then they had also traveled quite a bit together in Asia, especially Korea. So she talks about that as well. And finally, it's a memoir about living as a biracial person. So her mother is Korean, her father is white. So she often feels like she doesn't really fit in between these two identities. So she's kind of trying to figure out who she is. If you're a fan of that mother-daughter relationship, food memoirs, emotional writing, I can't recommend this one enough. I think it's such a great book club pick. It is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. And I also want to say we're coming up on our Q&A soon. So if you have questions, start thinking about those and put them in the chat.
All right, and my final book for this evening is Black Cake, a novel by Charmaine Wilkerson. In this extraordinary debut, boy, I've got a lot of debuts and I didn't even do that on purpose. In this extraordinary debut, two estranged siblings must reunite on the occasion of their mother's death, opening old wounds and exposing long-held secrets. This novel is a rich, woven tapestry of culture, characters, traditions, and social issues with several wow moments along the way. I think this is a great choice for clubs who like nuanced, realistic characters. That's always something that I look for, and I think those are really discussable. And family drama, as noted there, it's full of family secrets, skeletons in the closet, etc. There's also a multiple timeline saga, which is appealing, and then lots of discussion about Black culture. So a great read-alike author for this is book club favorite Britt Bennett. That immediately comes to mind. Also, anybody who likes just, family fiction that would be great read-alikes for that. So that's Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson.
Awesome. So I'm going to start by calling out a few more people had written in their favorite books of the last year. So I just want to mention those. Two people said Interior Chinatown. It's awesome. The Sum of Us by Heather McGee. Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. I think that one's being made into a movie soon. Braiding Sweetgrass by Kimmerer. Hidden Valley Road, we talked about that one last year. So yeah, thank you for contributing your favorite books of 2021. I love hearing those. So we have a few questions coming in. Someone is asking, are our choices in order of preference? No. I kind of just threw them in at any order. I think that's true for you too, Rebecca.
I think mine might have been like in publication date order.
Yeah. If I had to choose my favorite, it probably was The Maid, which was the first one I talked about, but everything else is not necessarily in order. Someone else is asking, with so many great books, how do you choose your suggestions? Rebecca, any thoughts on that?
So yes, well, I can tell you. So my choices, I probably should have said this up front, all come from the library reads list. Had to kind of tie it in there. And I noticed that many of Brenna's actually had also been on the library reads list. So yay. But yes, mine actually, and that's why they're in publication date order, is because I went through our last year of lists and then pulled them out by that. And what I look for is, if I haven't personally read them myself, which I've read most of those, but for other ones that I hadn't, I look for the description to say something usually about if it's got literary quality or not. I definitely look for characters, if the annotation mentions good characters, or social issues, because I know that those are two things that are really great to discuss. And then with nonfiction, I try and find books that maybe aren't so... I don't know if obvious is really the word I'm looking for, but I kind of try and find nonfiction that has wide appeal but on maybe narrow topics. Does that make sense? I try to not do, like celebrity type stuff or a lot of contemporary issues. I like doing historical nonfiction for book clubs, because I think, as Brenna and I have both mentioned in several of the books, the research is important. And if you can tell that the author has really put in a labor of love into the writing, that is another discussable element. So that's usually how I go through and pick.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And then as far as choosing the books that I talked about tonight, I was also looking for variety. So I wanted to make sure there was, historical fiction is always a big hit, but some nonfiction, some memoirs, some contemporary stuff, just so, if you want to mix it up, or your book club, likes a certain type of book, I want to make sure that I got a little bit of everything in there. Someone else chimed in with their favorite book, The Girl with Seven Names. I keep hearing about that one. I haven't read it. It sounds really good. Someone's asking for a list of the favorites. I think you mean what people are writing in the chat. I can send that out with the handout that I'm sending later. Are all of the books new and in hardcover? I think everything we talked about came out within the last year or so.
Mine are all from 2021, yeah.
Yeah, a few of mine are 2022. I think The Swimmers comes out later in February. I think that's the only one that isn't out yet. And there's a handful that came out just within the last month. So most of them are probably in hardcover. Some of them might be in paperback by now. Are the majority of authors female? Is this intentional? Yeah, I think I had 2 or 3 male authors. I think with book club books, it tends to go that way. Not necessarily intentional, but yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to that. It's funny. I actually have gotten emails from people before. It's always men who email me at Library Reads to yell at me that why is this month's list all female authors? And my standard response, I've actually started just ignoring them, especially if they're rude to me. But my standard response is, well, I'll be perfectly honest that, like 85% of librarianship or library workers are women, and we like to read books by female authors. So it doesn't surprise me that library staff is voting for this. But I think that in general, and I'm going to make this statement, it's very, very general, but women tend to, in their writing, they tend to focus on emotions and relationships. And a lot of those things are very discussable. Certainly not to say that men don't write about relationships, but most of the stuff that comes out from men tends to be nonfiction or, very straight up literary fiction. Jonathan Franzen comes to mind, that's one of Brenna's picks, very literary. And so it doesn't surprise me when women authors dominate the list, but definitely not done on purpose.
Yeah, I looked through 4 of the 20 were men, so
yeah.
Another person is saying their favorite book was Oh Paradise by Yun, and All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood. Someone is asking which of these are available as bundles. Quite a few of them are. Lincoln Highway, Personal Librarian, The Sentence, which is, I just bought that one if you're interested in it as a bundle. Crossroads, I also just bought. And so, yeah, those are easier to get if you're in a book club, but, I would buy some of these as bundles if I have you asking for it. So you can always ask me and I do my best to get it for you. Someone's asking, what did we think of Coulson Whitehead's Harlem Shuffle? I actually haven't read it yet, but I've heard that it's wonderful. Have you read it, Rebecca?
I actually have not read it either. It was a Library Reads pick, and we interviewed him when the book came out at a library conference. He was one of my panelists on an author panel. So very popular. I haven't read it myself though, but definitely a popular book.
Yeah, we're reading it with the Library Book Club in April, which is the only reason I haven't read it. I'm waiting so that it's fresh in my mind when we discuss it. But if you liked it, I would love to see you at our library book discussion. We can hear what you think about it. Someone had asked about Library Reads newsletter.
Oh, yep, I can handle that. So if you go to our website, which again is libraryreads.org, the front page is always the latest list. But if you explore the rest of the website, we've got our archive on there. We've got some other stuff about the things that we do and stuff like that. But on the bottom of every page, I'm picturing it in my mind, it's the bottom right-hand corner, is a little box for subscribing to our newsletter. So we do have a monthly newsletter, and we don't spam, it just comes out once a month, and it's got a link to the current list and to all the titles that are featured. So you can sign up for that. It's free, and we only send it out once a month. So please go ahead and subscribe. That would be great.
And we also have a newsletter for the book clubs at the library. I know many of you are already signed up for it. All of the book club leaders on my list get that one. But if you would like to be signed up, you can always reach out to me. I can add you to the list. I always have some book recommendations in there and information about any bookish stuff that's going on at the library. And I send that out 4 times a year. Couple more favorite books of the year: The Cold Millions by Jess Walter, Deacon King Kong by McBride, and some male authors. Thank you for throwing those in there. And then one last question, Rebecca, do you have any trends that you've noticed that are coming out in the next year that have come out over the last year?
So what we've been seeing a lot through Library Reads is this huge sort of overtaking of romantic comedies. Which is why I think it's kind of funny that, people are like, wait a minute, where's all the male authors? Well, they're not writing romantic comedies. I think this is definitely a direct response to the pandemic. I mean, honestly, I think people are looking for cheerful reads. They're looking for quick reads. You know, anybody that can sit down with Netflix and watch a couple of rom-com movies is definitely interested in reading rom-com books as well. So we're seeing huge popularity in that. We're also seeing thrillers stay pretty steady. That normally dominates the list of suggestions every year. Psychological suspense and thrillers, again, people kind of like escapist fiction a little bit. But what I'm seeing is very interesting. We're seeing a lot of social issues pop into these thrillers as well, which is, I've definitely noticed, you know, a couple of those, all her, which one was it again? All Her Little Secrets. Is that the one yes, by Wanda Morris. That's a good example of that, for example. It's a thriller, it's a legal thriller, but she packs in all of these contemporary social issues. And we're definitely seeing more of that in thrillers. I think we've kind of gotten over, for a while in thrillers, the big thing was, you know, women in peril. It was all the girl books, the girl in the train, the girl through the window, the girl who jumped off the roof. I mean, you know, all the oh no, women in peril books have sort of been shuffled off now. And now we've got these contemporary issues happening in thrillers, which is really interesting to see. It will be interesting to see how long that trend continues. And I'll also be interested to see how well those books age. They might end up being sort of an era, right? The other thing that I have been kind of watching is to see what people are saying about pandemic books, and the general consensus. I'd be curious to see what the listeners tonight think about that. The general consensus seems to be that a lot of people don't want to read about it while it's happening. And I sort of agree with that. I can see why. It's frightening, it's uncomfortable, and a lot of people are like, no, I read to escape or to get out of life. I don't want to read about the pandemic. So I'll be keeping my eye on that to see what I had noticed just recently in my own reading. I've been picking up a lot of books lately that are specifically set right before the pandemic. Like, you know, the author makes a big mention of, you know, this is in 2017 or this is taking place in 2019, and it's there on the first page. They're talking about it so that they're specifically trying to be as contemporary as possible, but leaving out anything pandemic related. No mask wearing, no COVID, no nothing. So I was fascinated by that, to see authors kind of tiptoeing right up and then just pretending that the last 2 years didn't happen. And I think readers appreciate that. But one book, if I've got a moment to talk about one of the books that I read last year that I really enjoyed, which definitely is firmly in the pandemic. It's called 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. And it takes place in Ireland. Two strangers meet right before the lockdown in March 2020. It's a very meet cute. They're in a coffee shop and, oh, let's, you know, go out on a date. And then, you know, like 2 weeks later, Ireland goes into lockdown and they decide to move in together. Perfect strangers. They think it's only going to be for a week or two. And it ends up, of course, being, you know, this 3-month lockdown, and it's filled with pandemic references because it happens in March 2020. It's an excellent thriller, lots of twists and turns, and I did not see the ending coming, which is always a big, you know, delight for me when I can't figure out the twisty turn at the end. So that was interesting. But it really, I would be not recommending that to anyone who does not want pandemic fiction. And I'll be very curious to see in the next year or two, if authors start putting more of the pandemic into their books, or if they play it safe and keep it out. That'll be interesting to me.
Yeah. If I could just jump on with one more trend, I've noticed this kind of like light fantasy or light sci-fi where it's like a very literary book, and then there's like some twist. And I think Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which was super popular last year, which has this kind of like alternative lives storyline. And The Sentence, which I talked about tonight, kind of has that. Clara and the Sun by Ishiguro was another one. So I'm starting to see a lot of those coming out. We have someone who commented, aside from the news, I don't want to read about the pandemic. Yeah, that's very understandable. Right. And then someone else who mentioned ebooks. So a little library inside information. This person is saying that they were able to get like a popular title right away. So I actually buy the ebooks for Libby, which is one of our, like you can download the app and get ebooks and e-audiobooks that way. And every month I buy a handful. They're like lucky day copies, so you don't have to wait on hold for it. So they're saying that they got the personal librarian that way, and that's probably how it was.
Oh, cool.
So I just want to mention that. Okay, I think that's all of the questions we have, unless you have anything else you wanted to add for the night, Rebecca.
I think I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm going to move on to our grand prize drawing. And when someone with the ebooks, we have Libby, Hoopla, and Access 360. Those are the different apps we have for ebooks and e-audio. Here is our contact information. Of course, I'm at the library. Rebecca Vnuk is at Library Reads. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us. I love recommending books, so if you any follow-up questions, I would be happy to see them. Thank you for coming out, Rebecca. Thank you for presenting.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.